Hello, old friend.
It's been a while, man.
Yes, I can't escape you.
Well, we used to have drinks together. Now,
Morning coffee together.
my morning coffee is probably your morning coffee too, despite the
No, it
time
makes
zone.
perfect sense. We start very early here with a 3-year-old. Good. How's the audio for you on my end? Every few years, you guys have a crisis in Brazil relating to your leadership.
Art is about materializing our existence and reflecting ourselves and our time and our society. This is exactly what the current government in Brazil is fighting us from doing. In vain, in vain. You pictured a moment in your neighborhood 20 years ago. How was that day?
The weeks before September 11th, 2001, I was actually in Africa. Flew back to do an assignment in New York and was jet lagged and up incredibly early because I was still on East African time. I heard the first plane hit the World Trade Center, thinking a plane had crashed in my neighborhood, ran downstairs, grabbed my gear, and ran out in the streets and started photographing what was basically in my backyard, not knowing that it was an intentional attack, not knowing it was an intentional act, not knowing that it was one of the, you can hear sirens running by.
We have to tell people this is not sound effect.
Yeah, it's for dramatic effect. Fire trucks are racing by in the background here. So obviously my hair on my arm begins to bristle and is like, what's going on? I need to look out the window and assess the situation. But that's again, that's a part of me now. 9/11 was bringing a sense of perception, feeling, love, shock, awe, disbelief. All of those things was happening inside of me at that time, as well as a great reverence for these towers, which were in my backyard, like two gigantic mountain-sized trees that I used to look at the World Trade Center and know what the weather was going to be like that day. There was always a sense of peace because there were like these stoic sentries over lower Manhattan. I ran to them with my cameras, wanting to document something that I loved and enjoyed and had great reverence for.
You're Canadian and you lived in New York for 25 years. Does it feel like home?
I was a guest in New York for the 25 years that I lived there. And I'm very fortunate for how New York shaped me as a person, to have this wide spectrum of experiences, well as also a wide spectrum of people who touched me and the cultures that touched me there. It's like, I'm in Los Angeles right now. I'm in the United States. I'm talking to Diego in Brazil, and we met in New York City and formed a friendship there that you can't pull apart. And those things are really important. And that's what New York has always been known as, this melting pot that brought people together from all over. And I think that that's why the events of September 11th are still so shocking, because that was meant to tear New York apart, to destroy New York, to destroy this place that forms such a global imprint on the world.
You use the word stoic. Do you think that this event brought a sense of fragility to the biggest city in the world?
Absolutely. New Yorkers always had this, like, you can do anything in New York. If you lived in New York, you can handle anything elsewhere. And that's the thing, is for this city that was had such a strength and this personality and this, swagger. I'm from New York. To take this like literal and figurative punch in the face, did a lot to the psyche of the people that were there, the psyche of the city, and the psyche across America for what New York represented.
I see many Europeans coming to Brazil because they get crazy here with the sun, the fun, things they don't have. There's the chaos instead of an uptight society where everything works. What were you looking for when you went to Africa? Let me know about your personal journey in these trips.
The drumbeat and heartbeat of the world comes from Africa. And every trip I made from 1999 onward showed me a new side to Africa that was remarkable and exciting. And the people having endeavor and entrepreneurship inside of themselves, and a thirst for language and self-betterment, and then their love of their families and the closeness of families and what families and brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers mean, and then the traditions that come down with that. All of those things shaped me, but they also just taught me about the family of mankind, how close and similar we all are, and how unique each culture is and how rich each culture is. This giant, endless novel, endless amount of chapters in this great book that um, begins telling the story of mankind and then leads to all these other spread of humanity around the planet and uniqueness that was created along the way.
You mentioned both experiences here in your book about that week in New York. The way I experienced New York and Africa are now the same. Both places exist at the crossroad of both absolute beauty and crushing tragedy. In Africa, I learned the meaning of compassion. In New York, I learned how to use it.
We can travel with our phone, but I don't think we travel with our soul as much as when I would go to those trips to Africa. And then most recently, you could say is my new Africa is Mongolia. And I've been going to Mongolia um, and working on a project there that has just been um, soul awakening and vibrant in the things that I used to find in Africa and still could, but Africa allowed me to have this contrast between the urban mindset, the go, go, go of New York City with the deeply feeling soulful part of this continent that was so remarkable. All these different people who've moved around this continent and created different ways of living and existing, and the music that comes from those places. Um, I know that you're a man of many tastes and cultures, and I think you've definitely been listening to the Tunisian and Moroccan rock bands. Guys who are living in refugee camps who got instruments and started playing their own version of rock and roll, which is amazing. And that's what Africa is. It just represents to me a place of innovation and heart and soul.
How was the Samburu series created? Why did you choose it?
I had actually gone to Africa in 2006 to DP film for the UN. And when I finished that 1 month project in Kenya, where I'd never been to Kenya before, I went back to Nairobi and went to go see my friend who I'd worked for in my youth in advertising. And she had this big smile on her face and she's like, Lyle, I've got this plan for you. I was going to go on safari. And she was like, no, come with me. We're going to go up north to the school project that you've been helping out. And I want you to meet some people there and see the kids that you've been benefiting and been benefiting from the fundraising you've been doing. I was like, okay, I'll go see these kids. That sounds interesting. And I had no idea what I was about to experience. And she was heading off to another project and dropped me off the side of the road at night with these gentlemen in these amazing outfits and beadwork and feather mohawks. And she's like, these guys are going to take care of you. I'll see you in a week. And I was like, what? And these guys are like, with guns strung over their backs, and they had big panga, machete knives, and they were all in these tribal outfits that I never even knew these people existed, and now they were going to take care of me. And in that very short span of time that I was in this village, someone had heard that there was an outsider there visiting. Whenever they hear of outsiders visiting, they usually think they're a doctor, and people felt I was maybe a doctor, and so they brought their injured to me, and so I spent a big part of that week treating injured people, including a very, very injured young boy who'd been burnt in a cooking fire accident, and managed to get him on a vehicle and to a hospital. And they said that I became one of them by them seeing the amount of compassion and focus I put towards helping one of their children. And they adopted me in. And I remember one of the first real portraits I took there was actually this young boy's grandfather. And he was so concerned about his boy, and the boy was sleeping with me at night. And I just asked him if I could take a portrait. He had this amazing cowboy hat on, and this kind of safari tunic jacket, and these beads, but he was maybe 80 years old. He had such a beautiful face that had lived and seen so many things. And I took his portrait, and that just started everyone's trust being built in this atmosphere, and led to all the portraits being done. And then the subsequent trips that I did after to visit them was based on being friends. And there wasn't an idea of an art project in this. It was a document and a baseline that was contributing to the memory, to their cultural dysphoria. And they explained to me that if I wasn't doing these portraits, they wouldn't have memories to pass on to their grandchildren of who they were. And so it became this very interesting cultural study, ethnographic baseline, and this almost yearbook of their lives for the time I was there. And it's become, and then I went back to New York, and we had some of the images published, and people got quite excited about it, and then it carried forward from there. And I still participate in that project, raising funds every year for the school projects they do, and the artwork has gone on to be something that they're very proud of, because it recorded them in their pride and in their strength and in their swagger. And people in New York and elsewhere in the world who've seen these images have told me that my images made them think of Africa different. To me, they were like the Rolling Stones of the bush. They were these amazing, like, are you kidding me? That is the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. Can I take your portrait? Yeah. And some of them couldn't even speak English, but it was you're a director. You understand pulling a performance out of someone, and the performance was fun because it was like, show me your brave face, show me your face as a warrior. And the young gentleman really gave to the camera, because they also liked the way I portrayed them too. And so that there was a bit of ego involved, and you want to look your best. You understand that, like, as a director, filming people to look in their strength and in their best. And that's where that body of imagery came from.
On another hand, you have your work with elements of America's cultural fingerprints, such as the Boombox series and so. But I haven't seen any work of yours with American people, only objects. What does that mean?
It's a really good question. I'm really excited to show my North America imagery soon. And I've been shooting in North America, both the United States and Canada, and even little bits of parts of Mexico for quite a long time. And America's gone through a period of tremendous amount of disruption. And with each movement one way, there's a sway the other way. Change in administration sways things another way. It's the North versus the South, the East versus the West. And I've been photographing the US for 2-3 decades nearly now. And I think it's going to be time to show that as a thesis. So there's the seminal body of work, The Americans, done by Robert Frank. And then there's the massive body of work that Richard Avedon did in his American series. And a lot of people, when Avedon's work came out, they were like, this isn't America. And even Robert Frank, they were like, this is not America. This is not America. And the reality is that was more America than people were willing to digest at that time. They were really willing to face it. And America's always been a brand of sorts. It's always been selling itself as the inclusive environment, the holistic environment, the best democracy in the world, the best constitution document, but like the best. And then when other photographers have gone and wandered through America and found the freckles and scars and disenfranchised and the forgotten and the overlooked and underlooked, and then produced these documents, it's made America shudder at who it is.
I think this is what great art is about, showing what the regular eye doesn't catch. And do you think the perspective on your work comes from what you've done in September 11 or these other art pieces?
I think it's seen as fine art documentary work. It doesn't quite fit into a bucket of journalism. It certainly doesn't fit into a bucket of commercial work of like a traditional ad photographer. I think my work fits into a bucket of a curious person with a sense of overdeveloped perfectionism, who is, when he sees something that he loves, that he has respect for, pursues it with fervor. And my work doesn't really fit day to day in a news magazine or a newspaper or an online discourse in that regard. It fits in people's homes. It fits in art galleries. It fits in lobbies of buildings where people want to show they look at the world a little bit different.
And where do you think your curiosity and your instinct are going to lead you to now?
I'm a modernist at heart. Like, I'm looking at your background there, and I have, that's so peaceful. I'm like, this chaos behind me of my bookshelves that are still unorganized is like drives me bonkers. But the new work is going to continue in the same methodical way that I've gone about doing things. I like pulling little things out of the river of humanity and just kind of cleaning out the background around it and making you focus on that. Like, for instance, the context that the boomboxes that I've photographed for the last decade have with these clean white backgrounds, and that they're presented in this almost religious reverence sort of way. I'm pretty much completed this Mongolia project, which I went there to go meet the gentlemen that hunt with eagles, and ended up finding out that the eagles were the stars of the show. And so put them on a pedestal and put them in a matter of focus.
I have to come back to September 11th because it's the context of our conversation. What amazes me so much about that cover is that it's as if you were ready to shoot it like a Nat Geo filmmaker. How did it happen? Were you pointing somewhere else and then all of a sudden there was the second plane and then up? And by the way, tell me, how did it go all the way to the cover of Time magazine?
It's a remarkable experience how it transferred from my camera to Time, but I had a medium format camera in my hand, and I was shooting the towers with one smoking and having the scar on the side and the other perfectly. And I just, you know, no damage to it at all, just standing stoic. I had the sun in my back. I framed it all up to have the juxtaposition between the two towers. And then I'd heard the second airplane. And off in the distance, I thought they were just, it was aircraft being rerouted in maybe out of Newark Airport, something like that, and which was close by in New Jersey. And then I saw the second plane off in the horizon flying straight, and I thought, okay, well, it's just going to come up the Hudson. And as it was flying,
So you saw it coming?
yeah, I saw it tilt its wing, like it was like in a predatory manner, like it was flying, and then it went, and as it dipped its shoulder, it was like it's going straight for the building. My framing was pretty much set up, and if I click the shutter on that particular camera, it has 1.3 seconds to wind to the next medium format frame. It's a Fuji 645Zi camera, and had an automatic winder in it, but it wasn't as fast as a 35mm camera. And so I've used that camera so much, I knew if I took the picture, I wouldn't get what was about to happen. And I waited. I don't know why I knew to wait or why I thought to wait, but I waited. And then that time frame, I saw the plane coming in, I knew it was going to hit, and I made a decision to wait to see what happened. And nothing happened for a second. Like it hit, nothing happened. And then I saw the flame coming out the back end, and I clicked the shutter, and the flame went up, the camera wound, I clicked another frame, and then I realized all the debris in the viewfinder was still coming straight at the camera. And I had to duck, and all the airplane parts and building parts started scattering and hitting around us. And
So 2 shots.
there's 3, and they're published in Time magazine this week, actually. Like I can show you, just hold on one sec. They just put out this special commemorative 20th anniversary issue. It's a story behind Time's cover. This is the frame before the cover. And then here's the frame just after the fireball had gone up, and I took this picture. Half a second is the difference in the story. Half a second is the difference in the impact of the image. Half a second is the distinction between a snapshot and a professionally composed image. Photography is a lot of technical things, but it's also timing. And that timing becomes innate the more you spend time with a camera and understand it as a tool, much like a motorcycle racer understands his motorcycle, a race car driver understands his race car, a surfer understands his surfboard. And you spend your lifetime working with these tools to develop an innate sense of familiarity with them. And I was lucky that I'd spent 3 years with that camera. I'd spent a year traveling with that camera. I knew its ability to render. And I was able to render my own sense of shock with that tool. Much like a guitar player, being able to render a feeling in their heart with the 6 strings on a guitar. But it's really amazing that it made it to Time, that all these little small facets of decision making led me to go run the film to a film lab in TriBeCa. They were processing the film while I went out to go keep photographing. I came back. I'd been shooting transparency film, so it was processed in an hour. It was ready. They were holding up all the film and people were like, oh my God, that's the cover of Time. Lucky Singh, who ran the lab, was like, that's the cover of Time. You guys got to get this uptown. And he called his agent, and his agent at Gamma, JP Pappas, was like, bring it uptown. We found a gentleman to let us in his car. He drove us to Midtown. We got out. We went to the Gamma offices. JP looked at the film, packaged it up. It went into Florence Nash's hand. Florence was one of the photo editors at Gamma. She ran it to Time magazine. It went directly to Marianne Golan, who was running the photo desk at Time that day. Marianne took one look at it, walked it down the hall to Jim Kelly, who is the managing editor of Time, and said, here's our cover. He was like, run with it. And they had, I think they had the issue of Time out in like 17 hours or 36 hours, I think is what they took to put together this issue of Time. And then it became the cover. A lot of things just lined up. The decisions that were made for the right reasons. And that was to share this image with humanity, to understand the scope of my own personal shock. And my own personal shock resonated with a global sensibility. And I think that that's why that image has endured for so long. There's nothing else like it. And it brings you into a very, very intimate space, and a space where you're looking at those towers with a sense of awe. And that's conveyed in the photograph. It's a sense of awe, a sense of reverence, a sense of respect, a sense of shock. All of those things come out in that image.
Lyle, it's always great to hear you. Someone who allows himself so profound experiences. I know your son is going to be very lucky to listen to your stories and be guided in life by you and your wife. I'm looking forward to meet them. Thank you so much, okay?
All right, take care.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.